This is Doctor Talks, real talk from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.
All right, welcome back to the Plant-Based Cancer Solution Summit. Glad you're with us. And today we have an exciting guest, give us a lot of insight and be really helpful to hear this and know about him. Let me tell you a little about Chris. Chris Wark is actually a long-term cancer survivor, lots of experience in this field for like years. It was like 20 years ago or something where he had his problem. So he's been a cancer survivor, a patient advocate, a best-selling author. He was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer at age 26 years old. And after the surgery, Chris made a decision to go against the doctor's advice and not do the chemotherapy and choose to use nutritional excellence and natural therapies instead. And it worked. 6 years after his diagnosis in 2010, he began sharing his story of faith and courage and determination and his message of hope that chronic disease like cancer can be prevented and reversed with a radical transformation of diet and lifestyle. And that's what it takes. It takes a radical change in your attitude that makes your ability to make a radical change in everything you're doing. And in the last decade, Chris has become one of the best known cancer survivors on the planet because he reaches millions of people each year as a blogger, podcaster, speaker, and global health coach through books he's written, through social media, and his website, chrisbeatscancer.com, chrisbeatcancer.com. So he's the author of 3 books. One is the national bestseller, Chris Beat Cancer, A Comprehensive Plan for Healing Naturally, published in 2018. And his second book, Beat Cancer Daily, 365 Days of Inspiration, Encouragement, and Action to Survive and Thrive, was published in 2020. And then he has a third book in 2021 called Beat Cancer Kitchen, Deliciously Simple Plant-Based Anti-Cancer Recipes, which is always good and fun to have that third cookbook type thing, All right, so let's get started with Chris. Chris, thanks again for joining me. Appreciate your time and your contribution to this summit.
Well, happy to be on it. I'm a big fan of yours, Dr. Furman, as you know, and it feels weird to be interviewed by you because I have interviewed you before, and I feel like I probably have more questions for you than you have for me, but anyway.
Yeah, but I'll have plenty of time for people to get information from me. So it's good to have other people show, wow, there's so much other, contributors to where we've come to today, So it's so glad you're here and contributing.
Thank you.
So, maybe people don't know you or maybe they've known of you, but just summarize your story, how you got into this and how that led you to really developing a career in studying and applying what you've learned for yourself,
Yeah, well, as you said, I was diagnosed at 26, and that was December 2003, just a few days before Christmas, with stage 3 colon cancer. And that was preceded by a better part of the year having strange abdominal pain, that I thought was maybe an ulcer, and was treated for an ulcer, but it turns out it was not an ulcer. And had a colonoscopy, and they found it a golf ball sized tumor, biopsied it, and a day or two later called me and said it's confirmed colon cancer. And I think it's important to point out that colon cancer is one of the fastest growing cancers, especially in young adults. And I don't mean that the cancer grows fast inside your body. I mean, it's one of the most prevalent, most common cancers that is being diagnosed in young adults. And there are a number of different speculations for that. One is our diet has really gotten to be so heavily processed and full of GMOs and with the highest levels of pesticides and insecticides and fungicides than ever before. And so, it's a myriad of factors, but generally speaking, colon cancer is a dietary driven disease. And there are many parts in the world that have extremely low rates of colon cancer. And I talk about this in my first book, but there are parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, that have 50 times lower the rate of colon cancer than the US. I mean, 50 times lower. It's incredible. And, these people have been studied and they do not have any kind of genetic advantage. Researchers have come to the conclusion that their remarkably low rate of colon cancer is due to their diet. They eat a diet. I love the quote from the study, which is that their diet is absent in cancer promoting foods. Essentially, I'm summarizing, which is meat and dairy. And so,
And you ate pretty conventionally right till the age of 26 when you got
oh
your
yes.
diagnosis? Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. I grew up on fast food, processed food, and junk food. I was
Yeah.
a child born in 77, child of the 80s and 90s.
Right.
And yeah, I just ate the standard American diet. And so, yeah, it's I think we've never been told that the rates of cancer, it's like a light bulb. We've never been told that there are parts of the world that have much lower rates of cancer. You know, like most people don't walk around thinking about that and thinking, well, what are we doing differently here than other countries and how are we eating? But anyway, so the countries with much lower rates of cancer and regions, they typically eat a lot more whole plant food. I mean, it's just a very simple thing.
Yeah.
And their exposure to environmental pollutants is much lower than ours. So they have and typically get more sunlight, more movement, more exercise. These are very simple things, right? So anyway, I mean, this is a rabbit trail. I didn't know any of that when I was diagnosed, but of course I've learned a lot since. But I was told you got stage 3 colon cancer. I was told by my doctor, we've got to get you into surgery right away and get this thing out of you before it spreads and kills you. And so like a typical cancer patient, I was like, just said, okay, your cancer patients are often rushed into treatment. Sometimes that treatment is necessary because it is an urgent situation, but in many cases, the lump or the bump or the tumor is not life-threatening, and they do have some time, more time than they realize to read and research and get second and third opinions and really understand their disease and investigate different treatment options. And so I had surgery about 10 days after my diagnosis. And when I woke up, they said, it's worse than we thought. You're stage 3. When I was diagnosed, they thought it was probably stage 2. And from there, I was told I would need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy. And so in the hospital, the two parts of my story of my hospital experience that I always tell is that the first meal that I was served after they took out a third of my large intestine was a sloppy Joe.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, really? Like, this is the worst cafeteria food I can think of, right? I wouldn't want a sloppy Joe on a good day, right? And definitely not as my first meal after, having a third of my guts cut out. So that was a surprise. Yeah, that was eye-opening. And then a few days later, I was told, okay, you can go home today. We're releasing you. And my surgeon came by to check on me one last time while I was in the hospital. He was making his rounds, and I just happened to say, in our conversation, hey, is there any food I need to avoid? Because I didn't know anything, but I did know that they just took out a third of my large intestine and sewed, it's a tube, right? Your large intestine's a tube. They cut out a section and sewed it back together. And so I didn't want to eat the wrong thing, and like screw up the surgery somehow with hot sauce or whatever. So his response was, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer.
Hmm.
That was it. No nutritional advice. And frankly, in making that joke, he gave me permission to drink, right? Alcohol, not a problem. Well, we know alcohol is a leading cause of cancer.
Yeah.
It's a leading cause of cancer. It's a group 1 carcinogen. Alcohol creates, there's a cancer causing byproduct of alcohol. It is produced in your body called acetaldehyde. It causes cancer. And so it's just wild that the medical industry, is feeding hospital patients whatever, like the cheapest cafeteria food they can scrounge up, sloppy joes, and meatloaf and stuff like that. And B, doctors are telling their patients, oh yeah, it's drink, doesn't matter, you can drink if you want to, alcohol, just do what
Yeah.
you want, right? I mean, doctors aren't even telling patients to stop smoking. That's how bad medicine has got. They're not even telling patients, and I'm not trying to say no doctor ever, but
Yeah, sure. But generally
many
speaking,
doctors, yeah, they just don't even bother. I think they just think, oh, they're not going to quit anyway. What's the point?
right.
So
They don't tell people they need to lose weight. They don't do anything. They just give drugs and surgery. We know. Yeah, we know.
yeah. And so, but I didn't understand that. I had more of a rosy colored view of
You,
medicine
yeah,
at that
yeah.
time. And so it was kind of shocking to me. I'm like, really? This is, they're not giving me any health advice at all. I need some. So I get home, I'm recovering from surgery. And as I sobered up and started to wean myself off the pain medication and really started to think about my life and my future, and, the idea of chemotherapy, of poisoning my way back to health didn't make sense to me. And I really had resistance to it. And so my wife and I prayed about it. And I just said, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, please show me. I just, just a sincere prayer of faith and surrender. And a couple days later, I got a book in the mail about healing with raw food, the raw food diet.
Wow.
And that was a book by George Malcolmus, God's Way to Ultimate Health. And George was a colon cancer survivor, and he had healed it without surgery, just had a radical diet change, raw food and juicing. And I was so inspired by his story. I knew it was an answer to prayer. I just no doubt in my mind, like, okay, I prayed, this showed up, and this is definitely a different path. And I
Chris,
was,
I'd just like to add here is that had you undergone chemotherapy, I'm not really bashing chemo right now, but I'm just saying that had you undergone that, that could have put you at risk for secondary cancers and damage living with the toxicity of chemotherapy that reoccurs itself with some further or secondary different cancer down the road caused by chemotherapy. So personally, the fact that you made this recovery and did not have the chemo makes me feel so good about your future health and your ability to live a long life now because you don't have the original cancer and you're not going to have a secondary cancer that occurs, 10 years later caused by the chemo either. So I'm really happy for you.
thank you. And I didn't even know that about chemotherapy.
Yeah.
All I knew was, man, it makes people look like they
Mm.
are dying, right? I had seen chemo patients in the world and
Mm.
how destructive it was. And so I had, I think like most patients, just a natural resistance to like, man, that stuff is really toxic. That looks like hell going
Yeah.
through that. And so I didn't want to do it just for those simple reasons, not knowing that yes, it's true that chemotherapy can cause secondary cancers and that many cancer patients who go through chemo get a short-term benefit of some tumor shrinkage, but then the cancer that is not killed by the chemo, like the stem cells, become more aggressive,
Yeah.
and that chemotherapy wipes out their immune system. So now when they're done with their chemo treatments, they have more aggressive cancer still lingering in the body and no immune system to fight it off. And that's the paradox of chemo, right? Is many of these drugs, they work in the short term, but in the long term, they cause a lot of harm and cause cancer to become more aggressive and your immune system's wiped out. So you've lost your army, right? And so again, didn't know any of that when I was making this decision, but I've researched a lot and learned a lot. But so I go, I immediately started on this raw food and juicing path because I was excited about it. I mean, to me, it was like, wow, I've never heard this before. This is fascinating. What, I wonder what will happen if I just overdose on nutrition, if I flood my body with good things from the earth, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, right?
Right.
Whole grains. Like what would happen if I did that? It's got something good's got to happen. Right. That was my, non-scientific, non-medical opinion, right? I just believed that healing was possible. And this is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
I believed healing was possible, and I was willing to take massive action to transform my life. And it started with the food. And then I started changing other things. I realized, oh, there's a lot of other things I need to work on, my attitude, my faith, my relationship with other people. But anyway, I can get into that. But just starting with the food conversation, yeah, I just wanted to overdose on nutrition. And then I learned as I started reading more and more that, wow, there are all these documented anti-cancer compounds in fruits and vegetables, that nature is full of antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and special nutrients that help your body survive and thrive through cancer and prevent cancer, heal cancer. And so that got me even more excited about what I was doing. And I'm just thankful that, that the Lord opened up that door for me. I mean, I asked for help and I got it. And I was Sometimes people say, "Oh, that was so brave of you or so courageous." And the funny thing is, it's like it didn't feel brave or courageous at all. Fear was the feeling, right?
Mm.
I was afraid. I was afraid to do chemotherapy because of, what it could do to me. And I was afraid not to do it because of the
Yeah.
looming threat of cancer. So
Yeah.
there, at no point did I feel brave, but I listened to my instincts and my intuition and trusted that was a path that God had given me, a choice he had given me. And so I decided to take it. And I found support. And this is a really big thing because
Mm.
the first oncologist I met with told me I was insane if I didn't do chemotherapy,
Mm.
and
Wow.
yeah, incredibly condescending, used fear to manipulate me and my wife, and essentially talked me into chemo. But I still had 3 or 4 weeks until I would get a port put in because I was recovering from surgery. And in that 3 or 4 week time, I was juicing and eating the giant salads and reading and learning and praying. And, and so I'm just so thankful that I had that buffer of time so that when the day came to go get the port, I just woke up that morning. I was like, you know what? I'm not doing it. Like, I am
Mm.
not doing it. I'm not saying I'm never doing it, but right now I want to build my body up. This is what I want to do. I don't want to tear it down anymore. I want to build it up. I want to go down this path and first. And so yeah, so I just I said no to it. But then I found a support system. I found a naturopath and who connected me with a medical doctor who was integrative and supported my decision. And that's huge. I mean, you really need a medical team that supports you, that's willing to work with you on your terms and not be in a relationship with a doctor that's, sort of like a bully,
Yeah.
that's like my way or the highway. And if you don't do what I'm tell you to do, they're going to tell you you're insane. And funny thing is the oncologist that I now see now just for periodic follow-up and all that, he told me, he said, you know what? He said, you made the right decision. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, we know now that for the type of cancer you had, which is Lynch
Mhm.
driven colon cancer, he said chemo wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
To hear him say that, I mean, this was many years later, right?
Yeah.
He said that to me, and I was like,
It's almost like you made the right choices. So look, I think that's a theme of this, why I'm running this summit. Let me just reinstate that one more time because I can't state it enough, is that the unrecognized power of nutritional elements and dietary excellence to prevent and even reverse cancer and enhance survival is not alternative medicine. This is evidence-based science with more proven benefits than conventional therapies like chemotherapy, more proven benefits. So we have thousands of studies, thousands, that document the beneficial effects of mushrooms and flax seeds and beets and green vegetables, thousands of studies. And they produce remarkable benefits. And that's really why I'm doing this. So in any case, it's not like back then when you did that, it was like nobody knew about this stuff. But now we have incredible amount of evidence of the efficacy of this approach.
that's so great. And you're right, because in the early 2000s, I read a bunch of books, from book
Yeah,
to book to book, but they were not heavily science-based books, and they didn't have a bunch of research citations, and
right,
they were mostly anecdotal, right? Either
right.
doctors or survivors sharing their story and sharing what they did to heal. And what I saw were these common threads. Yeah, I saw the common threads were lots of raw vegetables, right? Juicing was a very common thread. Exercise, detoxification, fresh air and sunshine, forgiveness,
Mm.
major common thread, and so stress reduction in general, but specifically forgiving people who've hurt you, and getting right with God. And so, like, as I saw these common threads, again, not scientifically proven yet, but enough to convince me or at least reassure me that I was on the right path. And so I just proceeded. I just created a daily routine for myself and just started taking care of myself in ways that I never had before. And I made my health a priority. and just started systematically just improving my life. Every aspect of my life that I saw room for improvement, I would sort of tackle. And the diet was like the gateway drug to
Right.
radical life change, right? Because if you
Yeah.
can get a person to change their diet, I know you know this, Dr. Furman, if you can get a person to change their diet in a big way, it unlocks this potential in them. And they realize, oh, well, wow, I can do this. What else can I do?
Yeah.
And then you start to see like a snowball effect of just positive changes in their life, and they're finally willing to forgive. Right?
In many cases, that's you're making a good point. People, I don't think about that often. In many cases, you see the diet can make a person think more clearly and be more at peace with themselves, less aggressive, less angry, and have less brain fog and concentrate more and actually be more forgiving just from the diet change alone.
Yeah, right. Those feel good chemicals, they get more of those in
Yeah.
circulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And exercise does it too, as we know. Like when people start exercising, it's one of the best antidepressants, and they just are generally happier,
Right.
and more optimistic about their future and their life. Like it really is cool to see that. And so, yeah, anyway, jumping back, it was really affirming to hear an oncologist say, you were right. You made the right decision. And again, I thank God because I didn't make a smart decision. I just prayed and got an answer and felt like, okay, I'm going to go this way. And it turns out, yeah, that the chemotherapy was especially ineffective for cancer patients with Lynch syndrome.
Yeah.
So anyway, knowing that now, it's good that there is progress in cancer treatment, and there's immunotherapy drugs that are certainly more effective and less harmful than chemotherapy drugs. So I'm optimistic that they're making progress. That the cancer industry as a whole is improving. And by the way, just want to make sure everybody listening knows, if you're doing chemo, it's okay. Like nutrition and exercise and forgiveness will still help you a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like
And there are some cancers where chemo is appropriate, but we'll talk about that another time. But yeah,
sure.
exactly. But certainly it's oversold in most cases it's given. It's not even doesn't even have to be given. But yeah, it's a little, but it's all great points. And you almost came to the interventions with superfoods and super nutrition instinctually and with Dr. Malcolmus's help that now that what I produce these advice and graphics and foods are just from scientific studies, you came to the same thing instinctually with trial and error, that now we have all the science that supports those things that you did, you know.
That's right. And I didn't discover
Mm.
the science until, 6.5 years after my diagnosis. I started chrisbeatcancer.com just as a blog because I just felt like, I just had this nagging feeling that, I need to share my story. I know there's people that I can give encouragement to and give hope
Right.
to, and that need to know, that they want to know because I wanted to know. And so that was just a part-time passion that I started writing articles about what I'd been through and learned and making videos and doing that stuff. And that's when I found the science,
Yeah.
right? That's when I started to learn more and more and realize, wow, there's so much nutritional science on all of these
Mhm.
incredible anti-cancer compounds like allicin in garlic
Mhm.
and ECGC in green tea
Yeah.
and, resveratrol. It's just there's so many, right? Sulforaphane and indole 3 carbinol in
Right.
cruciferous vegetables. I know you know all this, and your audience probably does too. But anyway, like once I started going down that rabbit hole, it was like just a whole world opened up, and I got really excited about it, and would obviously start talking about those things and learning more about the science. And of course, a lot of that's in my first book, and it was cool because again, I had wondered in the back of my mind, was I just lucky? Right? Because I'd been accused of, well, you were just lucky. Your
Yeah.
diet didn't do anything. Your diet didn't help. You were just lucky.
Yeah.
And then when I saw the science, I was like, no, it wasn't luck.
Right.
Right? There's a mechanism of action that is happening when you eat whole foods from the earth. Like there's a benefit that's measurable to your body, to your cells, and against cancer, to prevent recurrence or to prevent a diagnosis, or to help heal. And so, yeah, that we live in such a neat time now because of all of the science and so many, the internet and YouTube is provided all these platforms for brilliant, practitioners such as yourself and Dr. Michael Greger and Dr. Barnard and on, who are really attuned to the science and share that with people and teach, the
Mm.
layperson or the survivor like me.
Man, perfect. So back then, when you didn't have the science, what do you think were the three biggest meals, foods, things you did that were most important or most helpful? You know?
Yep. Yeah. So what I decided to do, it kind of, and I said this earlier, was I decided I'm going to try to overdose on nutrition. And what that meant practically was like, how can I eat every vegetable every day? Right.
You
And when I say every, right, it's like, how can I eat as many vegetables as possible, the most diverse
yeah,
amount of
that
vegetables?
we found that out. That it's the variety of your food, of that different types of plants you eat, improves health. If you
Yeah.
think now, it's not like just eating a whole bunch of one food. It's diversity of nutrients, diversity of fiber, many different types of phytochemicals that all work together. Yeah.
Right. And I didn't,
Mhm.
again, I didn't understand the scientific thing, but just instinctively I thought, all these vegetables are different. I want to get them all in my body. And so I just started making giant salads. Like that just became the default, the easiest thing to do. Instead of going through and trying this recipe with, maybe one recipe has 4 ingredients, another one has 6 ingredients. I'm like, well, if I make a salad, I can put spinach, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, onions, peppers, mushrooms, bean sprouts. I
Yeah.
can put garlic, oregano, cayenne pepper, curry powder on it. I can use apple cider vinegar and olive oil and flax oil. I can load this thing up with all of these anti-cancer foods. And so once I concocted that salad one time and it
Mhm.
was really good, because I was like, I'll just put all these spices on here and I'll just, just put all this, cram all this stuff on here. Oh, and also sauerkraut or kimchi. That's another really delicious addition. So anyway, I loaded it up and I ate it. And I was like, this is delicious. This is great. I could eat this every day. And then I thought, well, shoot, if I'm going to eat it every day, why don't I eat it for lunch and dinner every day? So I really did eat the same meal every single day for lunch and dinner every day for years. And
Right.
breakfast was usually just juicing. So I would, first thing in the morning, I'd get up and make a big batch of carrot juice. And then eventually I would add like beets and celery and more vegetables to the juice. But big batch of juice and drink the juice throughout the day, juice in the morning, and then have a big salad for lunch and dinner. And that was just my simple dietary routine. It was juice and giant salads. And then after maybe a few months in, I added fruit smoothies. So I would have a smoothie with blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries and a banana and just blend it up in some water. And that would be like an afternoon snack. So I was getting my anti-cancer berries in my body. So that was it. Those are the three major quote unquote food groups was vegetable juices, giant salad, fruit smoothie every day.
Cool. So what kind of nutritional practices have you now changed with the knowledge you've gained over the last 20 years to enhance the protective power of your diet that you kind of got instinctually
Yeah.
and through Dr. Malcolmus? Now you've learned even more. So what new things are now you incorporating as a result of your growing education in this field?
Well, at that time, when I thought, well, maybe I'll just be a raw foodist and just eat raw food the rest of my life.
Mm.
And if I have to, I'm fine with it. But over time, I learned, well, there's a lot of nutrition in cooked vegetables too. Cooked vegetables are also healthy. And
Mhm.
I also realized that based on my particular body type, I'm 6'2", I'm lean, and have a very high metabolism. I found that cooked food would give me more calories. So I modified a little bit from 100% raw, did that for 90 days. And then I modified working with a naturopath to 80% raw. And really the only thing that changed was I was just with my giant salad, I'd have a sweet potato, right? Or I'd have brown rice or quinoa, right? So I just started adding a little bit more cooked food, some starches to my meal. And then just over time, just progressively, I still love giant salads. I still love to juice. I eat predominantly plant-based diet. And, I, I, I just enjoy it so much, and I feel good doing it. And so reading, again, reading your books, reading Dr. Greger's books. Like, I've read so many books. I mean, what's behind me is like, I've got
Yeah.
boxes and boxes and boxes of books, that I've read that I just should cram on my bookshelf. But anyway, yeah, I've just learned that it's not complicated. If you just focus on eating whole plant food, raw and cooked, right? That you're supplying your body with wonderful vital nutrients that it will use. And if you avoid the processed food, the fast food, and the junk food, and restaurant food, not that I never eat out, because I do, but if that's just a very small percentage of your diet, you are setting yourself up for health and longevity. But if the majority of your diet is processed, fast food, junk food, meat and dairy, right, and loaded with sugar, salt, and saturated fats and things, then you're setting yourself up for chronic disease like every other American. So it
Yeah.
really is, it's not about perfection for the average person who just wants to be healthy. Perfection isn't necessary, but it's just about prioritizing, right? Priorities over perfection. In other words, you just say, you know what, I'm just going to make healthy eating a priority. I'm just going to raise my standards and just decide, I'm better than this. I have a higher standard now. And you just put certain food groups beneath you, right?
Yeah.
You just kind of decide, that junk food, processed food, whatever, that's beneath me, right? That's beneath me. I'm not eating that stuff anymore.
It's interesting because, the conventional person out there sees the way we eat and thinks it is being sacrificial and extreme, and they're not having fun when we're not having fun in our lives. And what we're experiencing and what I'm exhibiting with other people showing is that people have more peace with themselves, more gratitude, more love in their lives, more confidence, more courage, less fear, more happiness. And they enjoy food just as much. And they actually are grateful for the food itself and more enjoying knowing it's good for them. And they've also made it taste good too. And so you're not giving up, you're gaining so much. And I think you're a great representative of that, how much you've gained. And certainly you don't want anybody to have suffered with cancer or have problems that you've had in your life, but certainly you give back to the world, and also how it's really helped you have a good life, and really and a great attitude towards too, like it does with other people. So it's not we're not giving up and sacrificing, we're gaining so much.
Yeah. And I think it's good to have when I have these kind of conversations with someone,
Yeah.
I think it's great to just encourage someone to why don't you just conduct a personal dietary experiment, right? Just why don't you just try this for 30 days and see how you feel. Try eating a diet that's all plant-based, whole food plant-based for 30 days, right? Without eating processed food or fast food or junk food, without eating meat or dairy. See how you feel, right? Because it's hard for people to imagine feeling better until they feel better, right? Right. And then it's hard to imagine what more energy feels like when you're so accustomed to having low energy and you need caffeine to get through the day because your diet is not supplying you with really great energy. And so it's like to me, it's like you don't have to declare yourself a vegan, right? To be healthy, right? You don't have to pledge allegiance to anything. You don't have to take on a dietary identity. I'm a vegetarian or whatever. Like, just start eating differently and see how you feel. And then you'll understand. Like, and don't do it for 2 days and then decide, oh, this doesn't work for me, right? You have to give yourself 30 days because it takes
Yeah, the first week it could feel worse.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I felt worse. The better part of the first week, I had very low energy. I was kind of, like brain fog, and I just
mm,
didn't feel great, and that's very common. But once I got over that hump, I want to say it was maybe day 4 or 5, all of a
yeah,
sudden I just had a surge of energy. I was like, man, I feel good. I really
yeah.
feel really good today. And then it just continued. And so, yeah. So anybody that's thinking about, really doing a massive diet change, going for a whole food plant-based diet or even a raw food diet for a season, give yourself 30 days. right? Just decide, I'm doing this for 30 days, no matter what. I'm going to tough it out the first few days. And then it even helps if you want to take it to the next level to get your blood work done, right? Get your blood work done before you start, and then get it done in 30 days and see what's improved. And you may be very surprised to see just in 30 days how your cholesterol can come down, blood pressure comes down. I know you see this all the time, Dr. Furman.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you for being you. Thank you for the support you give all of us. And thank you for being part of the summit. And we're going to move forward with the mission. And thank you for being part of the global mission to improve people's overall health. So heart goes out to all of you. Thank everybody for listening, and stay tuned to the rest of the summit too. All right. Thanks again. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to Doctor Talks. We hope today's episode has enlightened and inspired you on your path to optimal health. Each day is a new opportunity to make choices that empower your well-being. For more insights and strategies, subscribe to our podcast and visit our website, www.drtalks.com. Stay connected, stay healthy, and join us next time on Doctor Talks. Real talks from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.